Hello and welcome to my FlossTube channel. I'm Jean Farish and I am so glad that you're here today. We are going to talk a lot about FAQs. I have some that I taped last week that I could not fit in the format. So we'll be sharing those and a couple of new ones as well. And I wanted to show you my Gracious Words sampler that is sort of back from the framer. So I'm hoping that this is going to show up, but this is a very sparkly matte that I chose for this piece, and it really complements the piece with the little bits of gold in it, as well as the frame. So when I say it's somewhat back from the framer, as you can see, I've got the frame and the matte, but it's not put together with the spacers and the glass yet. So it has to make one more trip back to the framer. So at this point, it's still in pieces, but I wanted to do a little close-up here of the frame so you can see that it's kind of like a rich brown, and then this part is painted. I'm going to tip this a little bit, see if you can see it better, is painted kind of a blue with a little bit of gold in it, and then the matte, the main matte, is like an ivory color, and then is like sponge painted with this very shiny gold. I'm absolutely in love with the project and with the framing, but it's been a long time coming together. I don't even remember exactly when I ordered it, but it was earlier this summer. And first the frame was out of stock, and then when the frame came in, we realized that the matte was out of stock. And then when the matte came in, I was still on my trip to the Southwest, the Great Parks trip, and I finally got time to go by Hobby Lobby and pick that all up. And now that I have photographed it, I can take it back and have the glass added. Now, the important thing anytime you're going to use glass is to not let the glass rest right on your needlework. In this case, with a double matte, that alone will keep that glass up and off of the needlework. But with the stump work, I'm going to ask them to also put it in a spacer so that the glass will be even raised that much more off of the face of the work. Now in this case, the frame has a very deep groove in it. I think it's called a rabbet, R-A-B-B-E-T. Not really sure about that term. I should look it up. But anyway, it has a very deep groove in it that I knew would be sufficient for adding an especially deep spacer. So whenever you are doing any kind of raised work, you do need to pay attention to the frame that you're choosing to make sure that the glass can be raised off that surface enough. So I'm going to edit in the FAQs that I didn't get a chance to put in last week's broadcast, and then I'll come back for a few more words. Paula wrote this. I must say that I so appreciate your encouragement to stitchers of all levels. Being self-taught myself, although I've been stitching a while, it can still be intimidating to see some of the fabulous work being done by others. But it's a meditative hobby for me, and I love it. And I think Paula really focuses on two things here that I hope that will always be part of my message to you. One is that needlework is very relaxing. It's a stress reducer. When people say to me, oh, I used to do needlework, but I didn't have the patience for it, frankly, I'm glad that they found a different hobby, because needlework should restore your patience. It should not take your patience. If it's frustrating, then truly I would encourage you to find some other hobby. I love it, and as such, you know, I want to encourage other people to try it. But there are hobbies that, you know, we all can't be great gardeners. We all can't, you know, run a marathon. You know, you do what works for you, and what enhances your life, um, whether it's by reducing stress or just allowing you to relax, or as Paula says, sort of a meditation. Um, but I would say, you know, try not to be intimidated by what other people are doing. You don't know what their life is. You don't know whether or not they have, you know, a zillion more hours in a week to do needlework than what you have. You know, we go through different stages in our life. I mean, I was once a young mother with, you know, 2 kids under the age of 4, so I know what that's like, and I don't think I don't think I got a lot of needlework done then. Used to get a lot of knitting done somehow, but you know, I'm in a totally different place in my life right now. So just try not to compare yourself to other people. Anyway, but also, don't downplay being self-taught. If you are self-taught, then that means that you had this ambition to learn something, and you went out and you figured out how to do it. You either found sources to read or to look at. You know, nowadays, I mean, obviously it's a lot easier now with YouTube. Back, you know, when I first started doing this, your only option was to go to the library and get a book out. Unless you know, happen to have somebody else in your life, a neighbor, a friend, a coworker, whomever, that did it, and you could watch them and do it. But I'm self-taught, and it's, you know, don't feel like that's, to me, that's a badge of honor, that you took it upon yourself to teach yourself something, whether it's needlework or anything else. Sharon wrote this. She's a first-time watcher. Thank you for doing this video. I am intrigued by your classes. Where did you get them, please? Okay, these are, the brand is Clic Magnetic, and I will put a link to their website in the stitch description. I keep saying stitch description, the episode description, and they are, at this point, I think this might be pair number 4 that I have purchased. As my eyesight has required a little bit stronger lens, I have changed them. And I also now currently have 2 pair. The other one's not handy. These are what I refer to as my regular readers. And I got the coating that's supposed to make it easier when you're reading, you know, working on a laptop or whatever. And then my other pair, the pair that you usually see me wearing, has a much stronger lens, and I basically use that instead of a magnifier. I take my needlework with me when I go to the eye doctor, and I tell her this is what I'm doing, this is what I need to be able to see. She asks me to hold it in the same sort of position that I would be holding it when I'm actually stitching, and she works with me to figure out how strong of a lens I need to get the magnification I need to do my needlework. This company also will work with prescriptions, and the next pair that I get, I'm going to be using the prescription that my eye doctor gave me, because I have now surpassed their standard magnification. So anyway, as they say, old age is not for sissies. You got to get used to all the changes that are happening around you, that's for sure. So at any rate, I like them. I put them on first thing in the morning, and I don't take them off until the end of the day. And very often I end up with 2 pair hanging around my neck, because I've got the readers, and then I've got the ones that I use for my needlework. Anyway, but I don't have any kind of financial arrangement with a company. I probably should have. I've referred enough people to them. But I love the product, and I am happy to share that information with you. Let's see. Okay, so we've got this question from Vicky. I've just returned to cross stitch after 25 years and can only use paper charts for many reasons. Today, this creates problems because many designers only want to do PDF downloads. There are many things I want to stitch that are not available to me. The reason I put this in my list of questions to answer, although it's really not a question, it's more of an observation, is twofold. One is, in my Etsy shop, I only sell PDFs. And part of that reason happened because of COVID. I stopped going to the post office several times a week, and so I started just doing PDFs. And also, it's kind of an arrangement that I have with cross-stitch shops that carry my designs, that they sell the paper versions, I sell the PDFs. But this is the reason I put this on my list, for Vicky and for others. When you have a PDF download, you can still print that as a printed chart. And if you don't have a printer at home, you can, let's see, I'm thinking, and these are major companies, and I'm sure that there are many small businesses that offer the same service. But like my FedEx store, Office Max, Office Depot, Staples, they all have print services, and you can actually email the file to them, and they can print it and mail it to you. So, and also there are, most libraries are happy to print things. So, I mean, I am not a computer expert. So the two things I would suggest to you, one is, if it's a service where you can email it, then that's easy peasy. If it's not, if it's a matter of going to your library, what you want to do is save it to a USB drive, thumb drive, some sort of, one of those little things about the size of a thumb. Save it to that, and then you take it to your library. And most printers nowadays have a USB port right on them that you can just stick it in there and print it. So there are ways around it. I mean, the advantage of PDFs is that they're universal. You can either use it on your tablet, your phone, whatever, and work it right from the PDF file, or you can print it, and then it's the same as if you had a printed chart. So just think about that. It's got advantages. Plus, if you save it, and I suggest anytime you buy a PDF, please save it somewhere on your laptop, your computer. Put it on a thumb drive or whatever. Have a thumb drive just for your cross stitch charts, where they're all in one place. Those things are so inexpensive now compared to what they cost 10 years ago. So that if you ever would lose your chart, you can print it again. Now, PDFs have a different copyright, and that is that you can't give it to anybody else. You can't sell it to anybody else. It's an agreement between you and the producer that you are the one that's going to be using that file. So that's one thing that's a little bit different. But that's all the more reason to save it to something, so that if you do lose it, or the cat chews it up, or it falls in a rain puddle, whatever, all the many things that can happen to a chart, you can always print it again. So anyway, it has its advantages. Okay, got this question from Ruth. Quick question. What thickness foam core board would you recommend for framing cross-stitch projects? 3mm or 5mm? The 5mm. I want to say that that's the same as 3/8 of an inch, but I know that my framer and even the big box stores around me have two thicknesses of acid-free foam board, and I've not ever heard them refer to it by millimeters, but If you have a choice between 3 millimeters and 5 millimeters, go with the 5 millimeters. Mainly, it's just a little bit easier to get that pin pushed in. You've got a little bit of thicker area to aim for. And then Marla said that under magnification, my linen is so beautiful, and I thank her for that compliment. And then she wanted to ask me what brand do I use. When you see me doing little stitch demos and whatnot, frankly, I am just grabbing something from my stash, and I have no idea what it is. I'm usually stitching on something light colored, just for the contrast with the floss. For my own stitching, I like the Zweigert fabrics. I love Legacy fabrics. And just this week, I ordered a couple of pieces that are Permin, Permin, and I'm looking forward to getting those and playing around with those. Looking for a source of fabric, linen fabric, that's going to be good for pulled and drawn thread work. That's a little harder to come by. And I've talked about that, of how linen is different for different purposes. Pulled and drawn thread work requires a little bit different characteristic than your typical linen for cross stitch. So the fabric that I've been using is no longer available, so I need to find another source. Let's see, Lauren, thank you for the beginner series. I'm a relatively new stitcher, self-taught. Can I ask, please, is the stitch count, if the stitch count is 100 by 100, for example, is that 100 stitches, or does that include the non-stitched areas, that is, between the design? Also, what's the best way to calculate the fabric size you need for a design? Okay, Lauren, if it's full coverage and it's 100 by 100, then I have to do the math. That's not 100 stitches. That's 10,000 stitches. If the design is 100 by 100 and it's solid stitching, you've got 10,000 stitches in there. Okay, so in the design, and let's use American Linen that we love, for example, because I think I know that by heart. It's like 189 stitches across, and I had to go get a copy. Okay, so that's on page 3. All right. And this, by the way, is a PDF on my in my Etsy store, and I have, printed my own copy. So on here, I'm mentioning that the full chart is 189 by 339. And then I do give the dimensions of each state, because there are, I was encouraging people to use it for more than just the whole big design. I mean, you could make little ornaments, you could make coasters. There's lots of things that you could do with the individual states. So if you multiply that out, it's, it's a gazillion stitches. I want to say, I started to say, but that hardly matters. But it does seem like, again, that this is another sort of trend in our industry, that you see a lot of people posting how many stitches they're doing and how many stitches a piece required. That's kind of a new thing. I don't ever recall anybody like in the 80s or 90s or even the early 2000s of people, saying to another stitcher, oh, I did 7,000 stitches this week. I think that comes back to that PDF thing and the fact that there are apps that people are using that record how many stitches they're doing by how many they're highlighting them as they get them done. However that's working, I don't know, because it's not something I use. But I want to say that it hardly matters. At least to me, it doesn't matter. So depending on the design, I would just guess that even something as big as American Linen that we love, that it's about I don't know, is it half and half? It wouldn't surprise me if mathematically I found out that that whole big area is 50% what we call white space or blank space or unworked linen, and half of it is stitched. And I want to say that to me it would hardly matter. So it's going to depend on the design. But the second part of your question about the best way to calculate the fabric size you need for a design, I really would encourage you as a beginner to learn how to do this on your own. And again, I'm going to give you a link in the episode description to an earlier episode where I did go through all the steps. Yes, there are fabric calculators out there, but it's still good to know how to do it yourself. And what you have to do is you use those dimensions. And again, using America Land that we love as an example, just since I've got it handy. So it's 189 by 339. You take each of those numbers and you divide them by the number of stitches per inch of the fabric that you're going to be using. Don't think in terms of the threads per inch. If you're stitching over 2, for example, on 28 count linen or 28 count even weave, you're going to be getting 14 stitches to the inch. So just erase the threads per inch out of your mind. It's the number of stitches per inch. Because I also will say that if you're somebody else using that same piece of 28 count even weave, stitching over 1, they are getting 28 stitches to the inch. So just think of the number of stitches per inch. Okay, so you're going to take those number of stitches per inch and you divide them into each of those 2 numbers. That is going to tell you the area that's covered by the stitching. To that, you're going to want to add fabric around the perimeter, both for finishing and for those who stitch in with Q-snaps or embroidery hoops or any kind of stretcher arrangement. We'll need extra fabric for that as well. So yeah, I'll give you a link that'll give you a lot more detail about that. Couple people left comments about retreats, thanking me for the comment about, leave your scents at home. But that doesn't sound right. Scents as in smelling scents, not your good scents. Bring your good scents, leave your smelly scents at home. People left notes about how, they actually get headaches or whatever. And when you've got multiple people in a small area, it's just a problem. Anyway, several people also mentioned how important it is to be willing to come alone. And I'm sure that there are exceptions, and I hope that they are few and far between. But in general, if you go by yourself, and it doesn't take long at all to get to know other people and to just slide right into that camaraderie. And also to ask questions. If it's a class type situation, don't ever be afraid to ask questions. When I mentioned on one of my episodes about people trying to do that, figuring out how big to cut your fabric or whatnot, and trying to use the metric system, kind of some reasons why that's probably not the easiest way to go about it, and then got into a little bit of the history of the whole Imperial system, which is what we use when we've got feet and yards, miles, etc. So let me just share with you some of the comments that were left. Linda said, we here in Great Britain only went metric in 1971. In fact, my daughter was born on decimal day, and this year we are celebrating 50 years of decimalization. It is surprising how many of us automatically still convert back to imperial measure despite most things in metric. It was to make us fit in with the common market in Europe. Kathy said, I'm a history buff and retired math teacher, so your history lesson was right up my alley. When I started teaching in 1975, we were supposed to teach only the metric system. Think metric was the slogan. It didn't last. One of the few industries to embrace it was the soda bottlers. That's why we have 2 and 1 liter soda bottles, and the 6-packs are 16.9 ounces, which is a half of a liter. Robin said, I'm by measurement. Grew up Imperial, but Canada converted decades ago and actually gave a metric measuring tape to every household when we did. Sounds like a very Canadian thing. I think in inches for knitting and stitching, metric for temperature and speed. Handy and not confusing at all. So I was happy to hear from people who kind of are straddling both systems. Let's see. Lastly, Ellen said, I've been stitching in hand and recently ordered some scroll bars to try when needed, and asked me my thoughts. I think that scroll bars are great. They certainly are very advantageous, I think, for large pieces. You will have to get your scroll bars need to be wide enough, or one of the 2 dimensions has to be the same. So let's say if your piece measures 24 by 36, let's just to round it off, 2 feet by 3 feet, Imperial system, then your scroll bars are going to need to be 2 feet wide, but they can be as little as 6 or 8 inches this way, so that you're working kind of looking at like a window of the piece. And then as you progress, then you literally scroll it. There's like little knobs on it, and you keep rolling the fabric up or down to give you the space that you need to be stitching. And scroll bars are very handy. I personally think that they are less likely to, first of all, you're not going to get hoop marks. Some of the disadvantages of hoops and Q-snaps both is the issue of squishing your stitches. That if you don't release it often from whether it's a hoop or Q-snaps, then you can actually kind of get ground in dirt. I don't care how careful you are. We have natural oils in our hands, and it is very easy to for that to sort of start getting kind of ground in, which is why a lot of people put like a cloth thing around their Q-snaps. And the whole thing with leaving hoop marks and whatnot. So a scroll arrangement avoids all that. So that's good. But the reason I left this to last is that this week, once again, I stumbled upon a question on Facebook where a person was asking whether or not it was possible for your stitching to improve as you're stitching in hand. And typical of Facebook, the comments immediately began to be, I stitch in hand and always have and always will. I tried stitching in hand and I hated it. I only stitch on hoops. Not answering the question that the person asked. She was learning to stitch in hand and wanted to know whether or not her stitching will improve with practice. My answer to that was, absolutely it will. One person left a comment that they later deleted, and I was glad that they did. I throughout the day, it's like I kept going back to it and reading it and thinking, do I want to respond to this or not? And I finally decided that I would just, as they say, just scroll on by, just ignore it. But it really, I mean, literally, I think my jaw dropped. The person said, people who stitch in hand don't care what their stitching looks like. Yeah, I'm paraphrasing, because when I went back to look and see exactly what the wording was. Like I say, the comment had been deleted. And I really hope that the person who wrote it deleted it themselves, realizing that it was pretty extreme. Because I'm going to sit here and tell you, I stitch in hand, and I'm not going to say that my stitching is better than anyone else's. I do know that my stitching in hand is every bit as good as my stitching if I was stitching with a hoop. So you're sort of comparing apples to oranges. You really have to compare your own stitching with the two methods. I hope that in all of my messages in my Facebook app and my YouTube episodes here, that I am stressing with you that you need to find the method that's comfortable for you, whether it's stitching with embroidery hoops or Q-snaps or in hand. Each system has its advantages and disadvantages. As far as comfort is concerned, people who talk about getting hand fatigue, it just seems like to me for every person who says that their hands hurt more with hoops, there's another person who says that hurts more if they're stitching in hand. There's no one size fits all. It's a matter of finding what you enjoy, what is comfortable for you, and what allows you to achieve the level of stitching that you want to achieve. You're not trying to please me, and I sure hope you're not trying to please anybody but yourself. So the other thing that I want to say is that when you stitch in hand, you can either sew or poke and pull. Or what I do is both. So it's not one or the other. Stitching in hand can be done with, each stick and stab, poke and pull, whatever you want to call it, or you can sew. Either one. And I just want to say that you can achieve pretty stitches any way you want to stitch. It's just a matter, like I say, of practice and doing what you enjoy. So yeah, I'm like I say, I'm glad that I just didn't respond to this person, because it like I say, I was like, you're kidding me. But I'm also glad that the comment got deleted. Anyway, so I want to add one more FAQ to that list before I close. And this one came from Judy, who wrote, what makes some fabrics retain the memory of her hoop more than others? And then she asks, is it the starch in the process, a finishing solution? This is really a great question. And the answer lies simply in the fiber content of these fabrics. Aida, the most traditional Aida, is 100% cotton. Linen, if it's labeled as such, really should be 100% linen. Most of your even weaves, however, are a blend of cotton and a man-made fiber. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, Linda, if you ever come across that one, is 100% cotton, as is Devosa. The two most popular even weaves, when I say that based on the references I see and hear about it, Jobelin and Lugana are both just about 50-50 cotton and a man-made fiber. So if you think about that probably least favorite household task of ironing, back in the day when all shirts were 100% cotton or 100% linen, they really were quite a bear to iron and to keep fresh looking. And then with the advent of, whoops, sorry, I had a little interruption then. Then with the advent of permapress, then you started having lots of shirts and other wearables that were 50-50 cotton and man-made fiber. And they are certainly a lot more wrinkle-free than 100% cotton. So that's probably the main reason why you see more hoop marks, for example, if you're stitching on traditional Aida or linen than you would if you're stitching on Lugana or Jobelin. So if you've noticed that, it's really not your imagination. There's some scientific basis for why one of them retains the hoop marks more than the other. So I am stumbling, it seems like to me, but I do want to wish you a wonderful week ahead, and I hope that wherever you are, you can stitch happy and stay safe, and I'll see you next week.